All right, let's dive into this. Why do some people always seem to be freezing while others are sweating buckets? We've got some reader-submitted articles here, one from the Times of India called Reasons Why Some People Feel Colder or Hotter Than Others, and another from Women's Health, Why Some People Are Always Hot and Others Are Always Freezing. And honestly, some of this stuff, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it?
Like, I always thought it was all about, how much body fat you have or how active you are. But it turns out there's a whole lot more going on. We're talking age, gender, even your stress levels can play a role.
Right. It really highlights how complex our bodies are. I mean, think about it. We're basically walking, talking thermostats, constantly adjusting to keep our internal temperature stable.
Okay, so you say thermostat. What's actually doing the regulating? Is there like a specific part of the body that's in charge of all that?
Well, there is. It's a small area in the brain called the hypothalamus. You can think of it as our body's control center for temperature. It receives input from temperature sensors throughout the body and then makes adjustments to keep everything in balance.
So it's like a tiny little thermostat up there in our brains. That's pretty
Oh.
cool. Speaking of thermostats, one of the things that jumped out at me in the Times of India article was that older people often have a harder time regulating their body temperature. They say it's because our metabolism slows down as we age. Can you explain that connection?
Sure. So our metabolism is essentially the process of converting food into energy, right? And one of the byproducts of that process is heat. So naturally, if your metabolism slows down, you're going to produce less heat.
Ah, so it's like a furnace that's not burning as brightly anymore.
Exactly. And that's why older adults are often more sensitive to cold and even more susceptible to things like hypothermia in extreme situations.
It makes me think about my grandma. She's always wearing a sweater, even in the middle of summer.
And there's a good reason for that. It's not just about comfort, it's about safety too.
I guess it's kind of like needing to give an older car engine a little more gas to keep it running smoothly, right?
That's a great analogy. And it highlights the importance of staying active as we age, not just for weight management, but because physical activity helps to keep that metabolic furnace burning strong.
So exercise isn't just good for our hearts and muscles.
Hmm.
It's good for our internal thermostat, too.
You got it. Now, on to the next interesting tidbit. I saw in the Women's Health article that women tend to feel the cold more than men. Is there any truth to that? I mean, don't we all have roughly the same core body temperature?
We do, but there are some key physiological differences between men and women that can affect how we perceive temperature. For one, women generally have a larger surface area to mass ratio than men, meaning they have proportionally more skin.
Oh, okay. So more skin means more area for heat to escape from. Exactly. Think about it like this. If you have a small hot potato and a large hot potato, the larger one will cool down faster because it has more surface area exposed to the air.
Interesting. So it's like women are the larger potatoes in this scenario, and we lose heat more quickly.
You got it.
Yeah.
And there's another factor at play here too. When we get cold, our blood vessels constrict, especially in our hands and feet, to help conserve heat around our vital organs. And this response is more pronounced in women.
So even though men and women might have the same core temperature, women's hands and feet might actually be colder.
That's right. It's a fascinating example of how our bodies have evolved these intricate mechanisms to regulate temperature.
And it explains why I'm always the one begging for a blanket at the movie theater. Okay, let's talk body fat for a minute. That seems to be the go-to explanation for why some people feel warmer than others. More padding equals more warmth, right?
Well, it's not that simple. Fat does act as insulation to some extent, but it's not just about the quantity of fat. It's also about the type of fat and how efficiently it's distributed.
So someone could have a lot of body fat and still feel cold.
Absolutely. For example, the type of fat that sits right beneath the skin, called subcutaneous fat, can sometimes trap heat close to the body, making the skin surface feel colder. It's like wearing a really thick coat but not being able to zip it up all the way.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about having a big puffy coat. It's about how well that coat circulates heat.
Exactly. Now, are you ready for a real mind blower? Stress can actually make you feel warmer.
Wait, what? Stress makes you hot. I thought it just made you want to pull your hair out.
Well, it can do that too, but there's actually a physiological reason for this connection. When we're stressed, our body goes into fight or flight mode.
Right, that primal instinct to either fight off danger or run away from it.
Exactly. And as part of that response, our body prioritizes blood flow to our vital organs, preparing us for action. This can lead to a sensation of warmth, even if our hands and feet are cold.
So it's like our body is getting ready for battle. even if that battle is just a stressful presentation at work.
Precisely. And that redirection of blood flow can make us feel flushed and warm, even if the room is actually quite cold.
It's amazing how interconnected our physical and emotional states are. I mean, who knew stress could actually make you feel hot? Now, I know we can't talk about temperature regulation without mentioning medical conditions. The Times of India article brought up hyperthyroidism and Raynaud's disease. Can you give us a quick rundown of those?
Sure, hypothyroidism is a condition where the thyroid gland, which plays a key role in regulating metabolism, isn't producing enough hormones. And as we talked about earlier, a slower metabolism can lead to feeling colder.
Got it. So anything that messes with your metabolism can throw off your internal thermostat.
Right. Now, Raynaud's disease is a bit different. It affects the blood vessels, particularly in the fingers and toes, causing them to constrict excessively in response to cold or stress.
So people with Raynaud's might experience that extreme blood vessel constriction even in mildly cold temperatures.
That's right. They might feel numbness, tingling, or even pain in their fingers and toes.
That sounds really uncomfortable. It's a good reminder that if you're having persistent issues with temperature sensitivity, it's important to talk to your doctor.
Absolutely. It's always best to rule out any underlying medical conditions. Now, here's something I found really interesting in the Women's Health article. They talked about how our perception of temperature can actually be psychological.
Psychological. So you're telling me my mind can trick me into feeling colder than I actually am.
It's more than just a trick.
Mm.
Our brains are constantly processing information from our senses, including temperature. And sometimes our expectations and beliefs can influence how we interpret that information.
So if I walk into a room and someone says, wow, it's freezing in here, I might actually start to feel colder, even if the temperature is objectively comfortable.
That's right. Our brains are powerful things, and they can definitely influence how we experience temperature. Think about it like this. If you adjust the thermostat by just 1 degree, it can make a huge difference in how people perceive the temperature of a room.
It's like we have this internal narrative running that shapes our reality, even when it comes to temperature. I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered so much ground already, from metabolism and age to the mind-blowing connection between stress and feeling hot.
We've only just scratched the surface. But even these initial insights can help us understand why some people feel colder than others. And more importantly, they can empower us to take control of our thermal comfort.
Exactly. It's not about being at the mercy of our internal thermostat. It's about understanding how it works so we can make informed choices. All right, we'll be back in a bit to dig even deeper into this fascinating topic.
Yeah, it really is amazing how much our minds can influence our physical experience.
It's like we're not just walking thermostats, we're walking thermostats with opinions.
Aha, that's a good way to put it.
So we've talked about how our age, our gender, even our stress levels can affect how we experience temperature. It seems like there's not just one simple answer to the question of why some people feel colder than others, huh?
Nope. It's a complex interplay of factors, that's for sure.
Out of everything we've discussed so far, is there anything that particularly stands out to you?
I think what really strikes me is how individual this whole thing is. Like, we all have our own unique internal thermostat setting. What might feel comfortable for one person could be absolutely frigid for someone else.
That makes a lot of sense, and it highlights the importance of, paying attention to our own bodies and what they're telling us.
Exactly. If you're constantly feeling cold or you're always sweating, it's worth taking a step back and trying to figure out what might be going on. It could be something as simple as adjusting your clothing or the thermostat, or it could be a sign of something more serious that needs to be addressed.
It's like our bodies are trying to communicate with us, but we need to learn how to listen.
I love that. It's about tuning in to those subtle signals and becoming more aware of our own internal landscape.
So before we move on, I think it would be helpful to do a quick recap of what we've covered so far. We talked about how older adults tend to feel colder because their metabolism slows down as they age.
Right, and we also touched on the fact that they lose muscle mass as they get older, which can also contribute to feeling colder.
And then we delved into the fascinating world of gender differences in temperature sensitivity. We learned that women often experience greater temperature fluctuations than men, partly because they have a larger surface area to mass ratio.
And also because of differences in how their blood vessels constrict in response to cold.
We busted the myth that more body fat always equals more warmth.
And we highlighted how important circulation is when it comes to feeling warm.
We also talked about that surprising link between stress and feeling hot, which I still can't quite wrap my head around.
It really is counterintuitive, but it all comes down to that fight or flight response.
Right, our bodies are basically getting ready to rumble, even if the only threat is a looming deadline.
Exactly. We also touched on a couple of medical conditions that can affect temperature regulation, hypothyroidism, and Raynaud's disease.
And we ended on that fascinating note about how our perception of temperature can actually be influenced by our thoughts and beliefs.
Our brains are powerful things.
They really are. So where do we go from here? What else is there to uncover about this whole temperature mystery?
Well, I think it's important to remember that we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much we don't know about how our bodies regulate temperature.
Like what? Give us a sneak peek. What are some of the big unanswered questions in this field?
Well, for one, we're still trying to understand exactly how the hypothalamus, that little thermostat in our brains, receives and interprets all those temperature signals from the body.
So there's still a lot of mysteries surrounding that control center.
There is. And we're also learning more about the role of genetics in temperature sensitivity. It seems like some people might be predisposed to feeling colder or hotter than others based on their genes.
Oh, so it's not just about our age, gender, and lifestyle. It could be written in our DNA.
That's what the research is suggesting. And then there's the whole area of personalized temperature control, which is super fascinating.
Personalized temperature control. Tell me more.
So imagine a world where you could adjust the temperature of your immediate surroundings to perfectly match your own personal comfort level.
Wait, like a personal thermostat bubble that follows you around? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right? But it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. There are already companies developing wearable devices and smart clothing that can regulate your body temperature.
So you're telling me I could be wearing a shirt that heats up when I'm cold and cools down when I'm hot?
Exactly. And these technologies are only going to get more sophisticated in the years to come. We're talking about a future where we could potentially create personalized climate zones within our homes and workplaces.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. So what you're saying is that this whole temperature thing, it's not just about understanding why some people feel colder than others. It's about using that knowledge to create a more comfortable and sustainable future for everyone.
Exactly. It's about taking control of our thermal environment and designing spaces that work for our bodies, not against them.
I love that. It's like we're moving from a world of one-size-fits-all temperature control to a world of personalized comfort.
And I think that's a pretty exciting prospect.
Yeah, it really feels like we're on the cusp of something big here. Like we're about to enter a whole new era of temperature control.
I think so too. It's an exciting time to be thinking about these things.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there one big takeaway you'd like our listeners to walk away with? Something to really ponder?
You know, out of all the fascinating things we've talked about today, I think the most important message is this. Pay attention to your body's temperature signals. Don't just dismiss them.
Like if you're always feeling cold or you're constantly sweating.
Exactly. Those feelings are often trying to tell you something about your overall well-being. Maybe it's a simple fix like adjusting your clothing or nudging the thermostat.
Or maybe it's a sign that you need to manage your stress levels. We talked about how that can really impact how we feel temperature-wise.
Absolutely. Or in some cases, it could even be a sign of an underlying medical condition that needs attention.
So it's really about listening to our bodies and not ignoring those subtle cues, all right? They might be trying to tell us something important.
That's it. It's about becoming more in tune with our internal landscape and understanding what makes our individual thermostats tick.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on something I never really thought much about before.
I'm glad to hear that. It's amazing how much we take our body's temperature regulation for granted until we stop and really think about it.
It really is. We've uncovered so many fascinating insights into why some people feel colder than others, and we even got a glimpse into the future of personalized temperature control, which is mind-blowing.
Who knows? Maybe someday we'll all be walking around in our own little climate-controlled bubbles.
Now that would be something. Well, that wraps up another deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of body temperature.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you learned something new today, and we encourage you to keep exploring this topic on your own. Until next time, stay curious and stay comfortable.